Amazing as always.
I think the best yet, actually.
All right. Good
Yeah,
evening, guys.
that was
How is
that was the best yet, Jeff. I
okay?
Hard
mean,
to read. Always hard to read.
like no audio this time. That's awesome.
No audio?
No audio, but that's okay. That's okay.
You couldn't hear
Oh,
anything?
No, that's okay though. That's okay. We can roll with that. Let's go with that.
okay.
We
So
can
this,
well yeah, after last week's spectacular display of um
Audio amazingness?
audio amazingness, that's right in line with what
Now,
we're doing.
before Dana gets going, it's always important to give a very important email, DJ Ron Show at gmail.com, so we can get all those incredible questions and comments. So that's
okay,
djronshow at gmail.com.
and that's the right email address this time.
Look, details.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. So this weekend, the media exploded. You had the BuzzFeed debacle article about the Mueller investigation and the Covington Catholic boys issue, and it really made me think. And for me, it really felt like the end of a relationship. um and this has happened to me several times with people in my life, where I learned that they're liars, basically. Like, I've seen them lie to others and then recognize that they're lying to me. And and some there's a breaking point where I just realize, oh, okay, this is who this person is. And it's not like I'm not going to interact with them anymore, but it just, from that point on, I've I change the way I receive what they tell me. I, instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt and, you know, assuming they tell the truth unless proven otherwise, I basically take whatever they say to me from that point on with a very open hand. And I just think, okay, if they're telling the truth, cool. But there's a good chance that they're lying to me. Like, unless I can verify it, I just kind of doubt. And I've done that with people in my life, and I can still love them, but I just know, I just keep them at that mental distance in my mind. And that happened to me this weekend, I think, with a lot of media outlets. So I really wanted to talk about the whole debacle. And Ron, you might have had a different experience with the Covington issue. But for me, it felt like it was like a final straw that broke this little camel's back.
That's a big bold statement from you, Dana. It is. And for me, it was just in line with everything that I've seen for a very, very long time. I can go back into the old conversations and the emails that we used to exchange, and many times, recalling specific conversations, I would talk to Jeff, and I would say, let's take the next story that the media puts out, the next big news story, and let's just start asking questions and see what we come up with. Because what I found out is that these stories never seem to pan out the way they initially start. So, in other words, like the two examples that you mentioned, we have a narrative that is thrown out, and kind of ran with. When you start digging in, you start looking at the facts, you start asking the right questions, suddenly it starts falling apart. So, and with that said, I mean, this is a small example of what happens continuously. And there's many stories that I'll maybe bring up later in the conversation and examples that have gone away and people aren't talking about anymore for this very reason. And that's because when you start asking questions about it, when you start looking into it, you start realizing, oh, that's it's more than interesting. It's beyond deceptive.
Well, an element of it that Dana was talking about is how it's not very hard in this case to look a little deeper. So some of the original headlines that were run, all you had to do was click on the video and watch it a little bit, and the narrative that was being put forth didn't match up with the whole situation. And then it sort of evolved over time to maybe more accurately describe what took place with apologies included at times. But the question became, well, I'm not a paid journalist. For me, at least, I wonder about
Not
these
yet.
things.
Not yet.
But
not yet.
But I hear the story. I have some of those feelings that you're describing, Ron, built in now, where I don't know whether it's on this side or that side. Doesn't matter to me. I just don't know that I can really accept things that I read as a headline anymore. So I generally like to look into things a little bit. And in this case, it was just moments after reading the headline, I discovered the story wasn't quite fitting the evidence that was out there. And not only that, but the evidence that was out there was crazy stuff. Like the the other group that was there, and then the fact that he walked into them, and you can see that on the video, whereas the story was that they surrounded him, and the fact that they were clearly there waiting for a bus, and when the bus came, they left. The fact that after he approached that boy and he was pounding in his face and doesn't do anything, and eventually the boy just turns around and walks away, and the crowd walks away with them, leaving the man just standing there. But that part's taken out. Like there's so many details, but the key is that all those details were certainly available to me, a nobody, to find instantly.
Well, I would like to interject one thing though, because I think from the timeline I'm getting is that like Friday, the story, that first video was released, and there was maybe a gap, I think on Saturday, the entire video was available. So I think there was a little bit of that going on. But you know, you just think, well, gosh, they sure ran to, or different media outlets and different journalists really ran to promote that story. You know, if all they had was that short clip, like they just took off.
Check this out. Check this out. This is a quote somebody tweeted. A writer from SNL says, "I will blow whoever manages to punch the MAGA kid in the face." That's Sarah Beatty. She's an SNL writer.
Now this brings up another element. So this moves away from the story itself to the reaction to the story. So you had this story, which at this point I think was initially quite misleading. And then the reaction to the story were things like that. And one I read from the Disney producer who did Beauty and the Beast, talking about putting the boys through a wood chipper. And there's a little cartoon of a man putting things in a wood chipper and blood coming out, which someone could say, oh, that's just, you know,
hyperbole.
He doesn't really mean to put them through a wood chipper. And I kind of like could understand it if I'm going to be thinking the best, but it's you just said to put those boys through a wood chipper. And then there's the new phrase doxing. I don't know names, but it's the person who cut Trump's head off and held it.
Kathy Griffin, you're
And
really on top of things.
she's talking about, I read two of her tweets about getting their names and exposing these people. And so now you have another element to the story, which is the reaction to the story itself. And it's a hyper reaction, which includes violence, identifying these children, these teenagers, where they live and so forth. And that's another element. Even if the story was accurate, I'd be wondering, oh my goodness, this
What
is this is
what
terrible. But the story, it adds a really weird element to it when you begin to think the story may have been, or I think at this point, it clearly was misleading. And then all these people with just a little bit of information are threatening to kill and maim people. It's a really interesting, quick little bit of information that occurred. And I think the March for Life was on Saturday or Friday. Which day?
Their march was on Friday,
Oh,
and
okay.
um, yeah. So the story, I guess, people were commenting on the first video Friday night. Then we didn't look into it until Saturday. So yeah, I just got completely. I mean, all the things you mentioned, like the journalist who did respond in that ugly, violent way. And again, even if you took the first story at face value, I still think that's a crazy response to have towards teenagers. Like
what a hey
any
what a
teenagers, that's just crazy. So it was from CNN. It was from, there are other journalists where, so it just is really disturbing. So those are the people who are writing these stories, and that's how quickly, what conclusions they so quickly come to. And it was really sad because I, I mentioned my homeboy Tim Pool so much, and he's really just risen to the top for me as somebody who I can trust. And he even commented on this story saying when he first saw the video, he's like, okay, that's weird, but didn't didn't promote it. And even when he saw it getting more steam, he thought, okay, I need to look into this. I'm not seeing any context. Like, he knew to fact check. He figured there was probably more to check out before commenting on something. So why is it that this high school dropout journalist guy who does videos in his apartment about the news, how come he can come to this issue with so much better judgment, so much better, like, just rational thinking, and with so much more care than NPR, CNN, some of these other outlets where I would think that they'd have a whole team of people thinking about how to deal with this story. And
well
it was really
well
disappointing.
can I add a little interesting observation in there? So contrast that with what we saw happen less than a year ago with the school shooting and David Hogg and his group of teenagers that went out into the media, and the difference in the way that they were treated, and how there was a big push that their voices need to be heard, that we need to listen to them. They have something to say. They were given a platform to go out into and different outlets, and if anybody criticized them, they were demonized. If anybody asked them questions, it was like, you're hateful. And so it's the same rhetoric, the same garbage that we continue to hear. But what a contrast, right? I mean, what a big difference. Now you have these teenagers, by the way, that they were called racist, they were called inbreds, they were called crackers, and you have zero outrage. I mean, these are teenagers, these are children. You have adults clearly, and this is not made up, it's not something you can't easily find, but you have audio of these teenagers being called racist and um, crackers and being told they need to go back to Europe. So, what a difference. And again, just another observation of what's actually been happening, what's taking place. So, the story is one thing, and I think everybody's familiar with what the story is at this point. But the story is one thing. The reaction to it is, as Jeff pointed out, is a whole nother thing, and the reaction to it is pretty amazing. And people are really doubling down on it, and they're not backing down, even though they know what the evidence is at this point. They continue to say these things.
Well, there was, I didn't read anything from this outlet, but I do know one of the people who made a comment about, I think it was the comment about wanting them all dead, wanting the kid dead, wanting the parents dead, wanting them all dead. That guy did get fired from Vulture, I think it is. So that was one instance where there was I guess that's an apology, right? Or
Well,
some type of condemnation. So I think there's some of that going on. But there's also doubling down.
Yeah, nowhere near what we see happen with people like Megyn Kelly, who simply made the suggestion that people don't think that way or didn't think that way at a particular time when it came to the blackface thing, and they didn't really think in those terms. She was immediately terminated just for that little thing. And we've got people, very prominent public figures, making vulgar, nasty, hateful, as they like to call it, and violent kind of speech, and there's nothing. There's no consequences. I mean, this guy that got fired, yeah, that is that's one instance, but I mean, we're talking about other very, very public figures that are doing the same thing, and we're not seeing any action.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how that first video or maybe the whole issue is so polarizing and is this type of like those images where you see either the old lady or the young lady, those things where people just see it different. I feel like I'm in a really perhaps unusual position because, or maybe you guys all agree, I don't know, but when I first saw the video and I saw it in the context of, I don't even know if there was a title, but it was the clip where they had the boys and then it had the Native American man saying his few words afterwards, and he looked really emotional. And I saw that and I immediately believed it. I thought that they had surrounded him while he was peacefully playing his drums. I thought that kid had stepped in front of him and was just taunting him by standing so close. I thought all the chants that they were saying were were them mocking him. And I totally believed it. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so rude. I thought that's so disrespectful. I had started, we have our one listener, right? And that listener had shared the clip with me. I had seen it once already, or maybe without audio, but I just barely had seen it. So I watched that again. And, or actually, no, I'd already seen it. I didn't see his version of it, but I had seen the clip. And I just went on about how parents let their kids be so disrespectful, how I see it. I see a lack of desire on some parents' parts to correct their children about respect. And I was horrified. I thought, oh my gosh, these terrible private school boys, how shameful. And then when I saw the greater context, then I it really did change my mind about it, because I saw the greater picture what was going on and how they didn't single him out, and how kind of like how chaotic that whole environment was. And well, I'd say now, like, okay, sure, they could have maybe done some things better. Um, Maybe the best thing to do would have been for them to just put their hands up and silently retreat, like just retreat from everybody. Um,
They
Maybe
did
that would have
retreat.
been blameless. Well, like immediately, like when
Well,
the man,
immediately.
but to me, looking at it now, I just see, oh wow, that was a really wild, confusing situation to be in. That was just, and I can empathize with some of the weirdness of having this man come up to your group banging a drum. Like, it was just wild. It was just all the things that were going on there. To me, it just seemed, um, again, not the same context as, oh, we see this Native American man. Let's go surround him and jeer at him. So
Well,
I had both responses to that same video, like, because, and to me the context mattered, and I don't think, um, and I think if all those boys had been, Mexican boys with no Trump hats on, I think I'd view them the same way as I view them right now. Where, like, okay, that was a weird situation, maybe the kid should have moved out of the way, whatever. But by no means should this have been a news story. By no means should this have been a national discussion of all the ways people could physically hurt those boys. Like, this shouldn't be an issue, but it is, right?
And
well,
on the flip, I know this is maybe going too far out, but there are scenes on video of the Antifa people beating people down, uh, mobs of people hurting people in horrible ways, real stuff like that, and that doesn't get any reaction that I can see, or any big headlines or any big push from the media. Now I know it's kind of, let's say that's a separate topic, but it's not. In that, why this? Why boys standing around waiting for the bus? Uh, and then those other things, which are really hard stories to wrap your mind around: the physical violence, crowds of people doing things, actual mobs doing actual attacks. But I don't want to talk about that. But I'm just saying that there's that too.
well, it's a good point because of all, like, again, the contrast between what we see, what happened with the teenagers like David Hogg and the other teenagers that joined him. You see continuously more than a double standard. It's not just a double standard. It's not just bias, because that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. But this is pretty clear, and it becomes more and more evident as you see these things happen all the time. But Nathan Phillips wasn't just a guy that walks up to these teenagers and he just happened to join the protest or the walk that day. He's a very well-known activist, apparently, and has had several different situations like this happen. So,
I've only heard one, but as a note, can I read to you what he said happened?
mm-hmm.
It says the man. This is from this is from the New York Times, and it's titled "How We Destroy Lives Today," and it's reviewing the entire event, and it's an opinion article. And they're beginning to tell the story of what happened, and in the process, they're talking about in the beginnings how there was limited information. And it says the man Nathan Phillips told two different versions of what happened. He told the Washington Post that he was singing a traditional song when the teenagers swarmed around him, some chanting, "Build that wall, build that wall." He decided the right thing to do was to get away. He, quote, "I've got to find myself an exit out of this situation," end quote. And then he told the Detroit Free Press that the incident started when the boys started attacking four African Americans. so he decided to intervene. Quote, there was that moment when I realized I put myself between beasts and prey. These young men were beastly, and these old black individuals was their prey, end quote. And it says many news organizations ran one of these accounts. Before you judge, this is them defending it. Before you judge the reporters too harshly, it's important to remember that these days the social media tail wags the mainstream media dog. If you want your story to be well placed, and if you want to be professionally rewarded, you have to generate page views. You have to incite social media. The way to do that is to reinforce the prejudices of your readers. Now, this is an opinion article, and that's just giving a little suggestion as to what's going on here. Is it's more than just stories, but you're trying to get page clicks. But unfortunately, those two different versions of the story, if you watch the video, it's very hard to believe either one. And people ran with it.
No. Well, I think we need to pause, because what we're hearing over and over again is that the media was given, a little bit of information, and they just simply took off with it, and they weren't thinking about what they were doing. They just said, we're going to run with this story, and we're going to go as though they didn't know what they were doing. And that's the problem with some of this stuff, because it gives them somewhat of the benefit of the doubt, like they didn't have available the thinking skills and the capacity to pause and say, wait a second, before we just start publishing these articles and saying these things, let's check this stuff out. As Dana pointed out, how is it that somebody that the amateur journalist, or somebody that not even an amateur journalist, maybe not somebody that's even considered a journalist.
Oh no, well he's a journalist, but he's like a one-man operation. Guy. So how is it that this guy didn't go to school? He dropped out of high school, yet he can. Anyway, just had to defend Tim. He's a journalist.
And it's a good point. It's a very good point, and it should drive more questions, and it should point out more important pieces of this whole thing. And the big thing that I see is this, the media taking the story and building a narrative. And they did, and they quickly did it. It wasn't like, suddenly this thing just spawned. These things are very calculated. They don't just do these things. They don't just put stories out there like that without knowing exactly what they're doing and having talking points ready. The problem is with social media and with a lot of other independent media sources, there's plenty of opportunity to question what's actually being said. And so, as what happened in this situation, and as what happens with a lot of these stories, the media puts out this narrative, and when questions start getting asked, it starts falling apart. It starts falling apart in a really nasty way. And for me, that's the really interesting thing to this, because you have these kids that are, they're obviously young, and they're supposed to represent these certain kind of ideas, and so they're used to kind of demonize anybody that associates with kind of the conservative thought. Now, somebody can say, it's a little over the top, you're overthinking it, but it's not. If you look at the evidence, if you look at what's happening and what actually took place, you can very clearly see that the media built a story, built a narrative, and not just ran with it, not just jumped with it, intentionally ran with this thing. They intentionally pumped this thing out there. And, you know, a lot of people have obviously made nasty comments. And clearly, this stuff, with the video evidence that we have available, and with all the consistent statements with that have been presented, it was, a lot of it was lies. A lot of it was lies.
And I think this is where you get to Dana talking about losing her relationship with media, because you put everything you just said together and what she said together and I said together. It's just hard to, tell me if I'm wrong, Dana, take them serious at face value. It's just it's all with the phrase is take it with a grain of salt. Is that the right phrase?
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't realize it wasn't like I was looking for something to erode my trust, but that did happen. I thought, oh wow, this really did. I think I said something to Jeff like, it's not just the nail in the coffin. Like, we've nailed the coffin when we've buried the tomb and set it on fire. So it's just, I just thought, wow, I'm done. So I'm really gonna be more circumspect in the way what I read, and again, unless they have a long track record of personally being very fair and balanced. So, like the guy I keep referring to, he's not a Trump supporter. He wanted Bernie to win. He's pretty clear about kind of where he stands. He leans left, but I've never seen him mishandle the facts. Like, he really tries to figure out what the facts are. I've seen him correct himself. I don't see him as someone who tries to only put forth the facts or the angle that aligns with his perspective or what his desires are. He seems to call out both, he calls out wrong where he sees wrong, and that seems very rare from what I can tell. And he's also not quick to call for violence against teenagers. That's probably a good standard too. As I was reading numerous tweets of journalists who are either joking about it or seeming very serious, I thought, this is terrible. Like, these are to me, these are very vile people. That's vile. That's a vile thing.
Real quick, Jeff. Let me put out a quote here. Let's see if we know where this came from. This is a good one too. It's a very powerful statement. It says, the media, the most powerful entity on earth, they have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. You know who said that?
Ron.
Nope.
Oh, you didn't say that?
Nope. Dana, guesses?
Hitler.
No, Malcolm X. Malcolm X said that. I'll read it again.
You're supposed to give Ned a chance.
What's that?
Oh,
you should have given
Ned can just type.
Yeah, he wants to type.
Oh,
but
he wants to type?
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Let me open this thing up here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it says, okay, I can hear you now, but I can't use the microphone, or I'll wake up the kids. Oh, okay. Well,
anyway, what do you think about that that statement? What do you think about that statement? That from Malcolm X?
Well, I mean, I guess if you, uncritically believe what is told to you, sure. And I think, even with the journalists I still want to be open to being critical, right? Just because someone has proven to have integrity, don't automatically assume they're always going to. But yeah, I think if you have an uncritical view towards media or different media outlets, sure, they will definitely shape your thinking.
Yeah, and as he stated, they're very powerful. Obviously, we see it over and over again with the stories and whatever's going on. Usually, you have, if you want to call it, the masses, right, kind of carrying the story and just believing what they're being told, and simply repeating it. So it's a and that's a very interesting quote. It's in my opinion.
Yeah, and I also had a lot of personal connection with this story right away, because because I'm very, this could possibly be me or someone I know or my own children, just for um, context for us. I mean, we participated in a March for Life, which is a little more comprehensive than just pro-life, about anti um, fetal termination. Like we do a march in LA that also celebrates disabled people and encouraging adoption, and um, what was the other one? Just like Down syndrome, so it's a comprehensive march, but it's very similar. It's like a sister march, sort of the March for Life in DC. So we were there on Saturday in LA, and when I saw the boys and then thought about the greater context of what they were doing, it's like, well, gosh, my children are some of my children are teens, and none of us wear a Trump hat. I don't think we ever would. But those other factors, right, of being part of a pro-life march, being young people, and maybe dealing with hostility directed toward those things like that, that could be my child. How would they respond? Would they then be smeared on the media? And we're also friends with a Catholic family who the teacher brings his students to that march. Um, his son wears a Trump hat at times, not the classic red one, but he wears something that has like a Trump or the slogan on it. And yeah, and I completely put that boy, that young man, in the shoes of what is his name? Sandman, Nick Sandman, right? The student who's at the center of all the controversy. And I thought, wow, yeah, that could be easily my friend's kid. Um, and they could be receiving the death threats and all the backlash for something that's just an overblown media response. And so, yeah, I very much identified with the people there, even though, again, I wouldn't want to gather with a bunch of Trump hat wearing people, right? But that's definitely a group that I could be part of, and that was really, really interesting. And I have an interesting fact though to add, because so I mentioned my Catholic school teacher friend, and I got some of his thoughts on it. And interestingly enough, although his son has worn his Trump hat, I guess, the last 2 years, often while riding public transportation, dealing with the public a lot in the Los Angeles area. And so far, I guess the only times people have talked to him about it, they've been positive responses to his hat. But I guess what my friend had advised his son to do before the pro-life march was to not wear that hat. And I think that's something that he would have, had he been the leader of that group, he would have advised them not to wear the hats, because there's crazy people out there, and those hats draw unwanted attention. And in the setting of kind of like marching for pro-life causes, he he would not have wanted that to be a factor.
Well,
So
let me
I thought that was very interesting. He, even though having so many positive responses, just with the idea of this march, that's kind of a protest, or maybe the grouping of all the students together, he would not want that.
Yeah. So
It's dangerous. It's dangerous to wear those hats.
It is. It is. And I have a friend from work that her son, he's an adult. He's in his early 20s, and he went out and he wore some MAGA gear, Trump gear, right? The Make America Great Again hat, and another shirt that he was actually wearing when I saw him. And he expressed that he had gone to a restaurant, and this group that was in the restaurant was started looking at him and making comments, and he didn't feel necessarily physically threatened, he said, but he was definitely getting some negative kind of response to what he was wearing, and some comments that were a little heated. So let me ask, Dana. I mean, you mentioned, I don't want to say I necessarily agree, and there might be some other reasons for not doing it, but you said that you probably wouldn't be associated or wearing that kind of stuff, like the hat, and your kids wouldn't. And so, though I wouldn't necessarily disagree just because of taste in clothing, but is wearing that hat, is wearing those things, is that associated with some kind of extreme behavior or ideas that are just completely unreasonable? Are you aware of anything like that?
Well, in doing research for this show tonight, so maybe I'm totally late to this game and I'm just not informed enough about other people's perspectives, but I decided to talk to somebody who I assumed would have a different perspective on the whole Catholic boys story. And I asked, or I don't know how it came up, but basically, what I heard from this person is anytime they see someone with a MAGA hat, their assumption is that this person is a racist. That's what they think.
Have you ever heard of Bishop Talbert Swan?
No.
Tell me about him.
He wrote, and this has two elements to it, something I wanted to bring up earlier. So it's connected, though, to Ron's question and what you're talking about. He wrote in Twitter, I don't care what the double hockey sticks, that spells hell, by the way, you all say. Okay, I don't know what WYPIPO is. Does anyone know what that one is?
What is it?
WYPIPO?
White people. White people.
White people. Okay. If white people can view young black boys in hoodies as dangerous and even kill them because of it, in parentheses at Trayvon Martin, don't tell us we can't perceive a group of white boys in the modern equivalent of a Klan hood, MAGA hats, as a threat. Now, there's two things in this that I think are worth talking about. One, the MAGA hat, because you just asked about it, and there you go. So I'll go to that second. But first of all, there are some who are saying, look, you keep calling these boys. Trayvon Martin was 17, but people seemed to say it was okay that he was killed and so forth. And I do think it's noteworthy that the age of, let's see, 15 to 20, in that age range, lots of things happen. And so when we refer to these children as boys, do we refer to all people in all situations as boys, no matter what they do? And I would actually argue, and I don't know what your thoughts are, that comment is referring to the fact that they're boys, and it's generally in the context of a situation like this, where he's standing there just staring at this man, not doing anything. Whereas, tell me if you disagree, if he were to start beating the old man, you wouldn't say, "Oh, he's just a boy." Am I correct?
Yeah, you wouldn't say he's just a boy, but I think in
You wouldn't
most
excuse his behavior if he started
no,
beating the guy, right?
but even like with our criminal system, we typically sentence even crimes, like even not just standing there and smiling, but even assault or murder. A lot of times there is an allowance made for the person's age
And
because we
expunging of
as
their record
adults,
for crimes before 18.
yeah,
And
or
these
you
kinds
just
of
don't
things.
get the same sentence because we acknowledge that they're teens, right? But they're still youths. They still get an allowance for immaturity.
But if this, would you agree with me that if he started physically assaulting him, you wouldn't have that same response? That it more is a combination of his age and the fact that he just stood there than it is just his age alone?
That I
If he
think it's
started physically assaulting the Native American man, you wouldn't say, "Oh, he's just a boy," right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I do, as another interesting side note, because you brought it up, but the Trayvon Martin story, what another example of a media disaster and fabrication of facts and a desire to present a narrative that was completely false.
yeah. But maybe to tie back in though, because the first comment was about the that hat and
Yeah, so maybe we'll move
how
on
when
from that.
it surprised me how like that was this person's reality, like where I guess I haven't really come to terms with when someone that many people, because it's not just the media, like there are a lot of people who heartily agree with the media response and the media analysis, who like this person, they were telling me very straightforward that anytime they see a person wearing that hat, they think they're a racist. And
Would you put them
that
into the
was
cat?
what
Would you put them, that person, into the category of what Malcolm X had been talking about in the masses and how the media is able to control the minds of the masses? I mean, because if we start asking questions to that individual, I almost guarantee um, we're going to come up short with examples of how you can substantiate that perspective. And that is, when I see somebody wearing a MAGA hat, I automatically think they're racist. Well, why? I
Well,
mean,
so
why? Well, like, because what?
because they think um Trump's a racist. And what I brought up is like, okay, so I've seen black men wearing MAGA hats, right? And I brought up, so what do you think when you see if you were to see a black guy wearing a MAGA hat or a Mexican guy wearing a MAGA hat? And they laughed and said that they would assume that they were probably paid to do that. So, which is funny, right? But I think they were acknowledging that, yeah, that it does break down because other races wear MAGA hats. I mean, it's not as popular, right, as probably the non people of color, but they could see how that fact kind of crumbles a little bit, erodes a bit of this perception that they
But
have.
but
And
they
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 were
did.
able to acknowledge though that they're able to agree with me that because I said, well, so if you saw a black person wearing the hat, you would probably think, oh, they support, say, assume he's a racist, right? Assume Trump's a racist, just assume it, right? Or give that point. Don't argue that. But you'd assume that they're supporting him because of other reasons. And she said, yeah, like maybe they're happy for what he's done for them, acknowledging that Trump has done some things for the Black community. And so that she could see that there's other reasons to support him other than the racist. But I thought, wow, to me, it's kind of chilling that if it's a white person wearing the hat, though, they're racist. If it's another racial group showing support for Trump, well, okay, then there's probably some other reason. It's not because they're racist. And
And you were
that was
doing
very
some.
enlightening for me to see that. And I think that's also just, again, chilling, I think, for, say, my friend's son, who I do not believe he's a racist, for as he goes about his day wearing a hat that supports Trump. It's just, it's chilling. And I guess I'm pleasantly surprised that he hasn't had a bad response to him in the last couple years.
Now,
Well,
a couple things.
go ahead.
The the reason I read that other comment, is because the hat itself, as your friend is pointing out and other people are pointing out, has become a symbol of racism. Discussion about that could be long and very interesting, but it has become a symbol of racism for some people, like Bishop Talbert Swan. It's the same as the Klan hood. And then I don't know if you heard about Alyssa Milano. I don't even know who that is, but I guess she's famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
famous.
She wrote, the red MAGA hat is the new white hood. And then she wrote, without white boys being able to empathize with other people, humanity will continue to destroy itself.
Well,
And of course, this is January 20th. And so this is most likely connected to the same story. And here we have red MAGA hat is the new white hood. And I think we could talk at length about. I think that's there's so many layers to that I find interesting. Layers to what you said, Dana, how the parent said not to wear the hat. And if you think about it, the hat has become a symbol in some people's minds of racism, or being a racist, to the point that this person and the other person are saying it's the equivalent of a Ku Klux Klan. It's the same as wearing a Ku Klux Klan hood.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, just to stop there, that's enlightening for me today to realize, okay, like that's what that's what some people are really seeing. And it doesn't matter maybe how how much of a non-racist you are if you wear the hat, right? Like that's what they see. And obviously I grant some people really are racist and they're also mega hat wearers, sure. But
if I may give a word from our silent viewer, Ned, he keeps posting little links and stuff, and I've posted a few of them for us to look at, and it's unfortunate that he is unable to speak, but he seems to be suggesting that maybe what's going on here is that we're just not Democrats. We're just the grand old party, and that's why we don't trust the media. Unfortunately, he's not able to comment, but he's giving statistics that show that the Dems trust the media more, and the grand old party, the GOP, trusts them less. What's interesting about the stat there is that overall, the majority of people in every party don't trust there a lot, or sometimes, sorry, rarely, never, for the category of, let me get that. Let me scroll down just a little bit here. Sorry. Oops. How often do you think news sources report news they know to be fake, false, or purposely misleading? And the majority of everyone thinks that a lot or sometimes.
That's funny.
It is funny.
Well,
But if you
yeah,
look at
okay,
it,
well,
92% of the GOP are saying that it is a lot or sometimes fake, false, or purposely misleading, and then only darn, it's hard to scroll on the screen. 53% of the other, and first of all, I don't know what I am, whether I'm Democrat or GOP. I used to be independent, but what do you say to that before we
you
go
were
any
you were
farther?
all what did you do? You were all into Obama.
Yeah, it is
You had
true. Ron, don't hurt
you
me,
had
but I
a
did vote
two
for Obama.
I think you voted for him both
Don't
times,
tell
right?
anybody, okay? No, actually, I voted for him the first time and then the second time against him, and I had my reasons each time for switching either way, and I have changed my party to. Anyhow, don't let's not get in the details of who I am. It's better that we leave that issue aside. But
Yeah.
what do you think of what is being
Well,
suggested here? I think what's being suggested is this is just it's truly
because
just a bias based on your party affiliation.
well, I think maybe it'd be better to kind of divide up because media it's just such a it's such a big term that's covering so many different things, right? Like is Catholic radio is fast who was I just listening to today? Father Frank Madrid or something on AM Catholic radio. He's part of media too, right?
This
Um
is a really good point. So keep going with it. I'm going to make a
so
comment.
I think what people typically mean is like mainstream media, right? They mean like CNN, MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Fox News counts. Does Fox News count as mainstream media? Because
I
wouldn't all
believe
those
so.
Republicans
Yes.
support that? Is that mainstream media? So Fox News,
Well, this is just news sources.
NPR. Yeah. So I think if you, I think, well, again, for me, the whole the death, my death of my trust or what little trust I still had, I guess it is for certain specific outlets, right? Not all of them, but yeah, you probably would have to go through outlet by outlet to really get to is this really a Republican Democrat thing? Because well, that's worth noting. I would tend to think that when people talk about mainstream media, it does lean Democrat. You'd have to acknowledge that. And when we looked at the voting, or wasn't it the voting and the
Campaign
endorsements?
contributions. Campaign
What? Yeah,
contributions.
campaign contributions for
90,
mainstream media. It
90,
was
I
like,
think it was 90% or more, if I remember correct, was
yeah,
toward Democrat.
yeah, yeah. Well, for Clinton specifically, it was a high majority of the mainstream outlets. They were all campaign contributors for the Democratic Party. So if you're gonna, I mean, I think you could be a really fair and balanced person. Like I think the media guy I like, he's he's he has his voting tendencies and he's open about those, but I don't see the I guess what I'm taking issue with more and more is the clouding of the story, giving a pass to one side while asking really hard questions to the other side, and seeing that consistently. That's the part that I take issue with. I'm really happy when people, or I mean, everyone has a bias, right? But I don't think it's just the bias alone that now I'm attracted to. I'm really trying to seek out the people who seem like they're not lying.
I have a funny one. Ned asks, "Do you know any journalists?"
Do I know any journalists, like personally?
And coincidentally, you happen to know someone, a close friend, who's now working, uh,
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
and she's very, very, very.
Yeah. Well, she's not a journalist. She's doing funding or something.
Yeah,
She's in
that's
the
good.
but do I know so personally any journalist? I mean I think just do I know? So like
Now I'm gonna
no,
call
like
this.
personally no,
Hold
not
on, hold
like
on.
I like to watch them, right? Not like I like to watch this person. I feel like I know them. You mean personally no?
But I'm gonna throw a flag like it's a football game, And I'm going to say so far, everything our watcher Ned is talking about is distracting from what we're talking about, but worth noting, I think, because he's talking about something, I guess, but we're actually talking about a specific issue, an example of this. And I think he's saying that we might be doing hasty generalization or something. But what I find interesting is that, and it's it's unfortunate that he can't speak, but it would be interesting to see what he thinks of
Oh,
the
just
specific.
wake up the kids. They need to hear this, Ned. Just wake them up. Turn on the mic. Just say, you know what, Ned? I am talking right now really loudly, and I have 4 of my children in the room with me, and they are
Yes,
sleeping through it. If I can
that's
do it,
true.
you can do it.
You know,
Not even kidding. We don't have strong Wi-Fi.
it is interesting though that somebody could actually, make the argument that that the media is trustworthy, and that not having trust in the media is associated with certain parties. Um, because if you're just simply looking at information that's presented, you're just simply analyzing the stories and all the things that the media throws out and has to correct and are inaccurate. Um, how do you have trust in the media like that? I mean, how can you say that the media even remotely does a decent job when it comes to these things? Because I don't know. Every single time a story like this happens, there's always just another side of this that sheds light on the bigger picture, and it's always a narrative, it's always a story, and it always follows the same line. And the bad people are always the same kinds of bad people, and the good people are always the same kind of good people, and the good people stand for this. And so
So I
Yeah,
think
I
well,
what
don't.
you
you're
could
saying.
also say, well,
Wait.
maybe they
Oh,
really are good. Maybe someone would say, well, it's because they really are the bad people, and these really are the good people, and that's why what you see as the continual drumbeat of the same narrative is just because this is what reality is. And sure, that could be it.
I think what Ron is saying is that GOP, the grand old party, they're just better critical thinkers.
Well, I just
Oh no, well, oh,
maybe
I,
I don't know.
Don't you think?
no, but
I
I
think
think it's
I know that a little bit about the high school curriculum, and it is teaching them to be critical thinkers, and that you should always check sources and question things. So 92% of the GOP are questioning the media. And Ron's just pointing out, they're just better critical. They paid a better attention in class.
yeah, and
I'm kind
again,
of being facetious, by the way, but it is also interesting.
yeah,
Um,
I think with the question though, if they had gotten really specific and say, okay, how trustworthy do you think this source is, and this source and this source, then that would be very interesting to see how it divides along um, party lines or whether it
yes,
does. Like, do you think an ardent democratic socialist is gonna listen to the AM
Infowars.
640. Oh, info. No, yeah, Infowars. No, or just like like some of the AM stations tend to be very right wing, or
Yeah,
I
there's
would say
the
independent.
Catholic news
Yeah, and they're going to say,
program is
yes, that
on.
is trustworthy. I trust them. They're going to say, no, they're totally biased. So that would be interesting. And I'm sure there's some survey out there that really gets into,
Well, I
yeah,
think
what do
it's
you
the
think
best
of
point you
Alex
made.
Jones?
I think it's the
Me?
best point you made in the context of this is that the successful media outlets, most popular ones, appear to be left leaning from the perspective of most. But if you were to ask that exact same survey about Catholic news radio, it'd be interesting to see if the GOPs would be on it'd flip if they were more trustworthy, and then the Democrats were not. Although a lot of Democrats are Catholic, and then uh, Infowars. What would happen to the GOP for
Or
Infowars?
how about George Norrie? And George
George
Norrie would just
Norrie,
be
man,
like,
he's
George
like
Norrie is just
shit.
like weird to everybody.
So it would be interesting if you did it outlet by outlet, and then if it is actually just more of a characteristic of the news media itself and the people that are listening to it rather than this overall general bias. It'd be hard actually to analyze that very question in a non-biased way because the people that are approaching the outlet have an opinion about it probably before they even um, listen to the story. And I would guess, although again, very hard to test, that that's going to affect how they view the Catholic News Hour and the
Yeah.
Infowars.
Yeah. I like Ned's questions though. Ned, you should throw another one out here. I also want to add, I really think the recent change in this last year of me deciding to completely be a non-voter, I think it's very. I think I already did feel pretty free in like, oh, I don't have to defend one party or always align one party, or I didn't really have a lot of that. But now even more so, where it's like I really don't feel like I'm beholden. I don't need to defend anybody. I don't need to defend the Republicans or the Democrats. Like, and not to say that I don't have my own biases or convictions, but it is a good position to be in. So, um, anyway,
One
that's
quick
just
question, and then I
maybe
want to
that
come
doesn't
back to
matter, right? Maybe
something.
you could just say, well, you would still, if you did vote, you would be a Republican. Well, okay, whatever. But, um, if I really don't, I am noticing it in my own mind where I really don't have any like skin in the game, like where, again, I don't have to defend anybody. I don't have to align with them. It's okay if the Republicans are all corrupt as far as me. It doesn't reflect on me. Um, Whereas I think maybe if you were like wearing a Trump hat or like um, campaigning for them, going out and doing get out
Dana
the vote
wearing
for
a
the
Trump
Republicans.
hat. I'm just
What?
imagining you wearing a. It's so not you in like multiple ways. Like,
So anyway, like where you would feel like if you did hear maybe disparaging news about them, maybe you would want to necessarily jump to, oh, I guess the media is probably biased in this story, right? Because you are invested in that party and
What
you're aligned.
do you think? Why do you so let's go back, let's take a very similar kind of situation. Let's flip it to the other side and let's talk about the hope and change kind of gear, if you want to call it that, right? And somebody that would go out and they'd wear something that represented the other side. And you don't have, although you could clearly point out the same kinds of concerns um, that exist for that party. So, for instance, as Jeff pointed out earlier, the Antifa movement. A lot of people on the hope and change, we'll call it the hope and change side, right? People that wear that gear kind of associate. Um, they don't separate themselves from those people. As a matter of fact, there's many clips, much evidence out there to say that although they'll say, well, being violent is not something we want to do, but we understand why they're doing that kind of thing. And so you don't have in our society, you don't have that same rule. You don't have that same kind of like threat. You don't have people being concerned about wearing a shirt that says hope and change.
Well, how about like a Hillary shirt? you
Well, you
know?
don't have that too. You don't, but you don't have that. You don't have that same kind of concern. You don't have the same kind of concern when somebody's out wearing the vagina hat. You don't have that's not demonized and associated with any kind of like thing. Although there's
Or like maybe
plenty.
they would get made, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people probably give dirty looks or
Laugh
comments, but
at them like you just did. Oh no, you did.
are you then like talking about physical, like a physical attack only, or
Well,
just a confrontation?
I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about, so for instance, um, in this situation, one of the big pieces of the story that we started talking about, one of the things that you don't really hear, you hear very, very slight mentions of it and people pass over it, but the fact that, these kids were called crackers. Now the guy that said that um, doesn't have he doesn't have any more status than the kid he was calling that, or the kids that he was calling that. And yet you don't have people voicing any concerns. They're not saying, hey, if somebody is associated with this. As a matter of fact, they avoid those kind of things. They're trying not to associate progressives with that kind of talk, but they're not demonizing it at all. But somebody could easily, so for instance, Fox News and right-wing media and conservative outlets could start this narrative and say, yo, there you go, you see, anybody that wears a hope and change or associates with those people, they're racist. And they'll go out and they're call white people crackers and tell them they need to go back to Europe, and they'll make gay slurs. And it's like, you again, you have this dual kind of, or not dual, but you have this two sides of this. You have one side that's clearly being demonized, um, regardless of what the evidence is. And then you have the other side, and it's plenty of evidence to show that there's violence, that there's hate, that the rhetoric is just over the top. And yet, nobody's out there saying, hey, well, if you wear a hope and change shirt, then that means you agree with people that go on on their Twitter account and offer blowjobs to people that will punch this kid in the face. And to me, it's like, to ignore that and to say that those things don't exist, and to say that that evidence just isn't there, that you're, number one, you're either really dumb or you're lying, because it's clearly there and you can't get away from it. And again, unless you're really dumb or you're lying, because when presented with the facts, like these kids being called crackers, that's racism. That's just pure out racism. And there's no, if that was happening on the other side, like the guy Nathan Phillips, Jeff mentioned the story, that he said that they were attacking these four black guys, um, and he was stepping in to help, and as they were the beast, or whatever words he used. um, that didn't happen. That was a lie. That was just a complete lie, and all that was just made up. And people more than just ran with it. They're associating. It's like the Trump hat is, or the MAGA hat is associated. It's the new Klan hat, or the new Klan hood. I mean, that's just, where do they come up with this? That's the problem. Where do they come up with this? And those are the questions that need to be asked. I mean, it's one thing to say that you know people don't trust the media and to focus on those things, but there's very good reasons why people don't trust the media, and it has nothing to do with the party. It has nothing to do with that, because there are plenty of conservatives. Again, this is another thing that is often overlooked, but there's plenty of conservatives that, when it comes to Fox News, don't like Fox News, and they don't like the stories that they run. They don't think they're asking good questions, regardless of the fact that they often do run a different side of the story. But the bottom line is there are plenty of conservatives out there that will say, yeah, Fox News is biased. Fox News doesn't run the story the way they should. They aren't asking the questions that they should. But more importantly,
92% of them,
yeah,
actually, according to that Ned statistic. Ned is asking all kinds of questions, and I'm not voicing them. I don't know if you guys can see the chat, but I know I can see
can't.
the
I
chat.
tried to, and I
So
couldn't.
can I read you? He went on a real Trump set of questions for a while. So he's asking, do you agree with Trump that the media, the media, end quote, are all fake news? Careful how you answer this one, because I kind of know something here.
Well, why don't we?
Careful.
Well, no. Let's do this.
Do you agree with Trump that the media are all fake news?
Well, that's
number. Truth, dare, double dare, or promise to repeat.
Hey, I want to quote. We're going to leave it up to Ned.
Oh, he always, that's okay. He always says fake news. He always says.
Hold on.
The fake news media.
All the media are fake news? Or did he say the opposite? Did he say that only certain outlets are fake
news? Well, so he'll say CNN is fake news.
Yeah.
So he'll say CNN. So how about that? Do you agree?
No, wait, hold on. I just got to call Mr. Ned out on this. He repeatedly states, and it doesn't even matter at this point. I don't know if I see links coming up here, but it doesn't even matter at this point. Individual clips over and over again. He's rounded out this complete statement, which is basically fake news, blah blah blah. Enemy of the people, blah blah blah. But then he says it when they asked. He's talking about there's certain groups that he doesn't like. It's not all media. But I want to read some more. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Do you consider Trump a reliable fact source? Do you consider Trump truthful? Do you consider Trump to be unbiased concerning the idea of race?
I'll take one question.
I want to answer. Go ahead.
Oh, so I heard someone say, it was probably Shapiro. He said something like Trump says a lot of stuff. And that's basically how I perceive him.
You consider Trump reliable?
I think he speaks very loosely. And where did he? So like he specifically lied. The one specific lie I could think of, right, is about the Stormy Daniels thing, right? So he is a person who lies. Now I don't know how.
Dana, you're not supposed to say that.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you want to talk about how often is everything that comes out of his mouth a lie, blah blah blah. I'm really glad I'm not married to him. So, yeah. So when you say truthful, gosh.
Would you
That's
say
a really good question.
Would you accept?
Would I call him truthful?
Would you accept something out of his mouth at face value, or would you like to fact check it first?
I would probably like to fact check. And although I think I'm kind of going, maybe this is just gut feeling read on it. I don't get the same, maybe I'll think about that more. So I would say I know people who I trust less than Trump. How about that? And I know very few people who I regard as really reliable, honest people. So Trump is in the mix somewhere. That was only one person. How about you guys can answer?
I'm gonna I'm going to task Ned with finding one statement about how Trump, because Ned asked, do you consider Trump to be unbiased concerning the idea of race? So I need Ned to give me one quote about Trump's ideas of race. Please find one, and then I'll ask you. I'll answer your question. So if you could be more specific with us, send me a quote about Trump's ideas about race, and then we'll see what we think of it.
Yeah.
And good
That's a
luck
good one for
finding that.
you, though, Ron. That's a
So
good one for you. So do you
good luck
consider
finding that. I
him?
don't know what he's going to find, but send us a quote that shows us Trump's ideas about race, and then I'll try my best to respond to the specific quote.
Well, I was gonna ask the same thing Jeff is asking, because I don't know what he's talking about when he
Yeah.
says, do you believe whatever the question was, like, do you believe Trump when it comes to race? And it's like, I don't know what that means. What are you asking? I mean, if you can show like a specific situation or a quote that brings, his leaning towards racism into question. I don't even know what that means. It's like kind of like this again. We have this thing out in the media and the narrative that Trump's this racist, and I don't have any evidence for that at all. I mean, there's like, as a matter of fact, it's the opposite. I mean, there's no evidence that Trump is racist. There's none. As a matter of fact, prior to him running for president, there's complete. I mean, it's like a Ned. Like, what universe do you live in? Like, where are you existing that Trump is some racist? Like, where's this coming from? And if you can't point to examples, then
Here's his first quote.
when he says
We
that
got a quote.
okay,
I'm the least racist person you'll ever meet. Ooh, what are you going to do with that, Ron? Is that the best you got, Ned? That's the problem right there, Ron. See, that's the problem right there. That's it's so I'm going to be honest, Ned. I'm so frustrated by all this.
Maybe that was a
Like,
joke. Just hold on, Jeff. Gosh, hold on. That's
no,
funny.
but really,
It's actually a funny
you
comment.
might think it's a joke, Dana, but that might be the best he's got. I mean,
that's funny. It's really funny.
well,
you could just wait.
Here's
you know what I'd like to do, though? You know what I'd like to do? Because I wasn't like all into, I mean, I watch very little TV, right? I don't think I watched any of his shows. What was the Apprentice? I didn't watch one of those shows. Um, it would be really interesting to see if maybe in like the years right before he ran, like the 6 years, because he's always been on TV, right? Doing the Miss America pageant, doing The Apprentice, or maybe there's some other show he was doing too. Um, See how many times there were any rumors or comments, or like maybe people refusing to work with him because they claimed what a racist he was. That would be really interesting. Maybe there were all these tales of him, or people calling him a racist.
Dana, got news for you.
Do the research.
Dana, if there was all that evidence, you would already know about it. And the reason why, here's the thing. The reason why, and this will go back to last week's conversation, when somebody just continues to talk and they talk and they talk and they don't allow questions, and they don't elaborate on thoughts. There's a reason.
Little grudge coming up.
No, it's not a grudge. It's just reality. There's a reason why people do that. And the reason why is because they have a narrative that they want to continue to push and that they believe. And this idea that Trump is a racist, and this is going to be a good one to really stick to and press here for a minute. This idea that Trump is a racist is not substantiated by anything. And I've heard plenty of people come out, and We've all heard it. There's people come out in the media that have worked with him, and they're like, I'm going to release this tape of Trump saying a nigger. And those things don't exist. And if they do exist, simply present it. Let's look at what he's saying. Let's look at the context of what he's saying and how he's saying it and determine at that point. But coming out and continuing to repeat that he's a racist, and he's a racist, and he's a racist, and he's a racist, that is just like propaganda 101. That's what propaganda is. We're witnessing it right now. This is happening. We have a guy who's making these comments on our show, and he's saying basically that Trump's a racist. It sounds like.
Wait. I have news for you. Ned has also responded.
Okay,
I
good.
find it fascinating that Ron jumped to the conclusion that I was accusing Trump of being a racist just from the question. Okay, now I have a bombshell. Ned, is Trump a racist? It's like asking a magic 8 ball. It's like, I have to just wait.
Let's call him magic Ned ball.
First, wait, I got an immediate response. Ha 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 ha. Exactly, Ron. Isn't that interesting? Okay, wait, come on, Ned. Is Trump a racist? We gotta wait, everybody.
You gotta shake it up.
Shake it. Okay, we're shaking the Ned 8 ball, and the answer is he has to think about this one probably. Well, hesitant. He got a ha 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 out, but
and there's
interesting, right?
There's a yes, and there's a very good reason why he can't answer that question and why he's hesitating. It should be very straightforward. There should be clear evidence. For instance, we have a very clear quote. I don't know the gentleman's name, but there's a quote floating around now from this most recent incident, and this guy calling these kids crackers. That's a racist quote. Yeah. Now, I love NPR's spin on it. That's just rhetoric. They allowed him to say that's just rhetoric. Well, if somebody if somebody like Trump had made an equivalent statement like that, just fried, absolutely, you'd just be done. You'd be toast. You'd be complete toast. Now, see, Ned doesn't have a problem, probably, with these white kids being called cracker. He's not. I don't think he's going to condemn this guy and call this guy a racist. He's not going to say what a horrible thing that was. Now, again, and I'm not saying he necessarily should jump into and make all these conclusions, but certainly if that had been a Trump supporter making those same kind of equivalent statements, there'd be racism and hate and all this stuff. And so here we go again with the narrative being that, Trump's a racist and he's associated with all this stuff, and we have zero evidence for it.
Hey, but guess what? I have some evidence, though. He is unable to answer the question.
Good.
And I have you know what's funny about it? Can I just talk about this for a second? It's very important. In today's climate, if he's anything like any other person on this planet, he knows he can't say yes, because I don't think he logically, maybe he'll say it, but I think he's struggling here, because if I can get into his head, yes is a problem, but he knows he can't say no, because if you say no, that's like all hell breaks loose.
Yep, that's right.
And, Ned, maybe he isn't having any thoughts about it. He's just wondering what he should answer. But he did get stuck on this one. He brought it up, but then he's stuck on whether Trump is a racist.
Because
it's so
because Jeff, here's what happens. Here's what happens to people like Ned. They're not used to anybody questioning the narrative. And when people do, he listens to stuff where the narrative just is pushed and nobody gets the question. And when they do question, they're shut down, and they're not, these things aren't elaborated on. But he's dealing with a situation at this point where you have individuals that are asking questions, that are demanding evidence, that want to hear facts, that aren't saying, hey, I'm not saying you're wrong. Let's just see what the evidence is. Let's take a look at the facts. Let's see what are you talking about? He's not used to that kind of stuff. He's used to somebody just going on, talking points, putting it out there, and just simply accepting it and not asking any questions, not saying, that's interesting. Is he really a racist? Is there any racist behavior that we can point to and substantiate this claim?
But before we move on from Ned, I am waiting for him to provide one quote about Trump's views about race. And I'm not accepting your quote that he said he's the least racist person. That's not his views on race, as you asked us about. He's telling you he never answered the question, first of all, and he says Ron seems stuck in a particular narrative, and he says how he loves Ron's assumption that I don't like my views challenged, and he's just putting ha 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 a lot. So I'd like to move on back to the hat, because I think there's something very important about the hat. I have it on the screen here.
Well, notice, and please move on to the hat, but notice he's not substantiating anything. He's just keeps saying ha ha ha, and that I'm jumping to conclusions. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I do a lot of research on this stuff. I read a lot of people's comments. I do a lot of engaging with people. I know how this works. I know how this works very well. I know this game. This game is played 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, every single day, and it's right in front of you. It's very easy to do what he's doing. The problem is he's just not used to this format.
Well, I think though you need to, even if you've engaged with people before, you still should treat Ned Silverstein as an individual and probably not assume things that you can't really be sure of. Well, right? I think we all want to be treated as individuals and engage without someone presupposing a lot of things. Sometimes maybe those presuppositions are right, but sometimes they're not.
Well, when you see the honeybee going up to the flower and doing what the honeybee does, nobody's sitting there going,
I wonder what that bee is doing.
I wonder what that is. Should we ask? No, that can't be the same thing that it always is. You see, he's doing the same things that they all do. And so in my illustration, I'm not coming to any judgments. I'm not making any kind of judgments, and I'm not ignoring him as an individual. As a matter of fact, I've said some very nice things about him as an individual.
About his hair, his style.
Well, no, he's articulate. He's well-spoken. He's intelligent. I've said all those things. But in this particular case, and with a lot of the things, these ideas, and because I know where he leans on some of these things, there's a playbook, and he's just simply following the playbook. And so when you know the playbook, and you know how this works, it's very easy to identify, what's going on. And so very easy to start asking questions and to get to a point where you go, well, I know he's not going to be able to answer that question, and I know he's not going to be able to substantiate it. And so I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to try to get a response, hoping that I'll get a response, because I'm not hoping that he can't present evidence. I'm not trying to push an agenda. I don't have anything that I want to say. I'm not protecting Trump as not being a racist because, I want to be able to wear my MAGA gear and pride. I'm just asking the questions everybody should be asking, and a lot of people are asking. These aren't my questions alone. I'm not exclusive when it comes to this thought. This is something that more and more people are asking, and one of them, if you want to take somebody that's black, calls themselves black, identifies as being black, Candace Owen, very prominent conservative media figure, she's constantly asking these questions and saying, where's the evidence, where's the proof? And again, every single time it comes out to the same kind of thing. It's a diversion. It's a ha ha ha. I love how he's trying to do this. I love how he's ignoring this. And no. Answer the question. Present the evidence. That's all you have to do. It's very, very easily. Milo does this all the time, and it's brilliant. He says, you can simply shut me up. Easy. You can shut me down. All you have to do is present the evidence. That's all you have to do. Point to the evidence, and you can shut me down. And so, same kind of thing. Shut me down with the evidence. Put it out. And if I'm wrong, I'll go, hey, yeah, you know what? That's racism. But until we see that, sounds like, the same old game.
Now, as we move on from that conversation, there's more to it. He's now posted a link to the racial views of Donald Trump, and we would need to, it would take, I think, more than what we have at this moment to get through all that. I do sense I think I get what you're saying, Ron. I think Dana's just pointing out anytime you talk about what the honeybee's up to in his mind, it has that potential for getting into one's thoughts and intents versus, like, for example, if you phrased it just alone, I've seen this many times, and people seem to be doing these kinds of ways of speaking. You kind of like generalize it. You might not ruffle as many feathers, but I don't think we should focus on that. I think we're rabbit trailing a little bit here, and maybe I'm wrong, and I don't have a strong position on it. Can I just go back to the hat, please?
Yes, please.
All right. So I have on the screen here Alyssa Milano again, because it reveals something else that I hadn't really thought too much about. And that is when she writes, the red MAGA hat is the new white hood. Without white boys being able to empathize with other people, humanity will continue to destroy itself. Now, 80,000 likes. 80,000 likes. Now, that's not an infinitely large number of people, but still 80,000 people.
How many likes did the show get last week?
Ours? It's hard to count that kind of stuff because it hurts. So the 80,000 people agree with the sentiment that the red MAGA hat is the new white hood. That red hat is the same as a Ku Klux Klan hood. And I think there's a lot to say here, and I'll try to be concise. But first of all, the white hood was a self-created outright racist thing to hide people's faces. Is very evil because you could hide who you are and commit crimes, right? And it was actually a group who used it in the name of racism, right? It was outright obvious, stated that's what it was. It was for racism. It was racism, right? Whereas this red hat is a campaign. It's a red hat with a campaign slogan on it. And since they're calling that the new white hood, that scares me a lot. Because one thing was an overt attack on people, a horrible, evil group still exists to this day. And they're saying that's the same as somebody who puts on a red hat that has a campaign slogan on it. And you already said it, Ron. Like, that would be crazy to think that if someone's wearing a hat that says change or whatever the one was for Obama. What was it for Obama?
Hope and change.
Hope and change. And you'd say, oh, that person's A. And then you what would it, I can't even think of a Ku Klux Klan. Someone wearing that's the same as a Ku Klux Klan person. And I understand how those things could become associated over time, like perhaps, but this is a weird one because it is just a campaign slogan hat. And as my wife pointed out, there are people of multiple skin colors and ethnicities wearing this hat, and it isn't a Ku Klux Klan hat. And then the other thing is, I've felt with my own children, I've given them what I feel is good instruction, which is that if something you're wearing or whatever is offensive or weird, like, I would avoid wearing it because our culture is just culture. It's just a made up thing. So if you walk into a certain place and they say red is an evil color, then like you might not wear red just because you don't want to, red doesn't matter to you, and so you might not wear that. And you walk into another place and they say blue is an evil color, you might not wear blue just because like you don't really care about wearing blue. And so I do believe that cultures have clothing associations and so forth. And if it's not for anything of great value, might ebb and flow with that kind of stuff. But this is a little different. This is actually saying you are not allowed to wear a campaign slogan. This has gone beyond just like preferences and so forth. They're saying you are not allowed to advocate for that president. And if you do, you're the same as a Ku Klux Klan member.
Well, and again, you take Alyssa Milano's status in the media, and what she is and what she's used for. And we go back to the quote. We take the big picture here, but back to the quote from Malcolm X, and it says, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent." And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. And so I hear what you're saying, Jeff. I definitely hear what you're saying. There are things in our culture. But a lot of that, like if you take the hat situation, a lot of that's being created. And you have people that are, very, very public. They're celebrities. She resonates with a lot of people in Generation X, if you want to call them that age group. She was on TV and she's been in a lot of popular shows. And so when somebody like her comes out and says that, the red hat is the new Ku Klux Klan hood, that's propaganda. And
it's scary propaganda, right? Because it's not just clothing. It's saying you're not allowed to have a certain opinion. And if you do, you're the worst in our society. It's the same kind of, it sounds so close to what they used to do to the Jews. And they would call them rats and stuff. And as soon as you have this particular idea, you're trash. Not just trash, like the worst. Ku Klux Klan is the worst.
Yes.
And now if you wear a political slogan on your head, you're horrible. And I read it in the comments on the video for these boys at the thing. People were saying all that needed to be seen were those hats. And there was this repeated theme that they had those hats on. They're racist. And she's saying they got Ku Klux Klan, and you're talking about propaganda. It's kind of weird. At least 80,000 people agree with her. And how many of those 80,000, that was kind of a new thought for them, and they like it? That's what propaganda does, right? It inserts this idea, and now they're like, yeah, that is the new Ku Klux Klan hood.
Well, or maybe just they've already been thinking this for the last 2 years, and it's just getting more.
But
they're just getting more vocal about it, because I think for the person I talked to, this doesn't seem like a new thought to them. It was enlightening to me to realize, like that's what that means to you. But this didn't seem like it happened overnight or just with this weekend.
When are they going to pause, though, Dana, and ask good questions and ask for evidence? I mean, because the person you talk to, I would be pressing that person and asking them for some kind of substantial evidence to back up that thought, even if it was just their opinion, and say, hey, okay, so if you see somebody in that hat and it represents racism, like what do you mean by that? Like what would lead you to that conclusion? Why would you think that? Is there a certain behavior that's displayed from people that wear those? And it's like, well, no, just people in general that wear that hat are racist. What does that mean? Like, what are they doing that's racist? What's associated with that? I mean, and here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about this stuff. And often I've seen responses where, they'll say, well, the wall, the wall's a racist, and it's like, well, the wall didn't originate with Trump. And people have been pushing for the wall, the barrier, the fence, whatever you want to call it, for a very, very long time. And nobody was jumping to these conclusions that it was racism when it was Obama. Nobody was jumping to these conclusions when it was Bill Clinton or Hillary or Schumer or any of these other people that have made all these same things, Nancy Pelosi, whoever you want to call. And they get out there and they say, we need immigration control. We need a wall, blah, 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 or fence, whatever they want to call it. Nobody was saying that that was racism. And it's like now all of a sudden it's racism. That's problematic. And so it calls for additional questioning, and it calls for somebody to be able to say, well, this is the reason why I believe it. They can't just come out and say, well, it's just racism. That's just because. And you end up in a situation like Ned.
Well, I guess I've had.
He's gone.
Well, so
he said he had to go.
So not everybody likes to talk, but over the years I have talked with this person, and I think I do have an idea of why. I think for them it's just anybody who could support him, Trump, has. Well, actually, it's really interesting because it's only the white people. Because with the other groups, this person acknowledged that, they were. So, like, for example, Hispanics were brought up. And I guess there's they just said they read some new poll or heard some new information that like 50% of Hispanics are in favor of Trump now or approve of Trump. Which seems really high. So maybe Jeff could fact check that. But where they brought up this like pretty high number of Hispanic support and how that kind of, surprised them. But if I were to get into this person's mind, I would think that, again, just like when they said with the black people that, they probably are supporting Trump for another reason, not because they're racist, but if they're white, it's because of racism. And I think, largely it's due to the Mexico-U.S. border issue. They feel like the Mexicans, they have expressed in the past, they feel like the Mexicans have been unfairly targeted and maligned.
It's really great when you start pressing people on those questions. You get them to admit, and they have to quickly stop, but you get them to admit that when you say like, so all these Mexicans, according to poll numbers, and not just poll numbers, but pictures and videos that you see, Hispanic communities, embracing Trump as president and saying that they agree with his ideas, including border control and all these stuff, and there's plenty of videos out there now, and they say, well, they're supporting him for other reasons, and then you say, well, are you saying that they're incapable of understanding the same things that you do? When you ask that question, it puts them in a little bit of a dilemma. And that dilemma is, well, what do you think, that they're not intelligent enough to understand what you're saying and to see the things that you see, that they're blind? And does that have to do with their skin color? Are they not superior in that way? And so it becomes very, very problematic either way. Again, if you start to ask the right questions, because it's to go on and say that, Hispanics, they're supporting Trump for different reasons, and, they don't understand, that he's really a racist. That's kind of an insult. And for me, if I was, in that situation, which I am because I'm white, and whites are continuously targeted with these kinds of things. But if I was Hispanic and somebody said, that, well, they support him for different reasons, and you start asking the reasons why, and it boils down to, well, they can't see it. It's like, that's an insult. And that's, I don't know. I find that very problematic. especially when, again, you start really digging into it, really asking the good questions.
Yeah. Well, I remember how when I don't know, I guess it was one of the Russian groups who made all those memes or some of the memes, and they said that their main goal was not to really have one president or one candidate over the other win, but a main goal was just to create division and have Americans arguing with each other and angry at each other. And in seeing the comments on this story, especially with all the updates and in my Facebook feed, I tried to have a varied source of, or I try to have varied sources, right? So, I follow Sean King and Business Insider and ABC News and Daily Wire, and I try to Occupy Democrats is on my feed. I try to read from a variety of sources, and yeah, the comments section is pretty wild and pretty angry and pretty divided, and so it doesn't look good for us as a country moving forward and being peaceful and giving each other the benefit of the doubt. It'd be nice if things change course, but it just seems to be getting uh, more and more merciless, and like with this particular story, just very quick to jump to the worst things, and say the worst things, like the statement with the producer of the Beauty and the Beast, who said all the MAGA boys go into the wood chipper hats first. He did apologize though, just recently. I just saw that. So that's nice.
Woo.
Well, yeah.
And he deleted it, but yeah, I think it's a really ugly place. And I think we should, hopefully the norm, though the majority of people aren't so quick to want to wish death by wood chipper to groups of teenage boys, no matter what their political persuasions are.
Well, and I
hoping
think
for the best, right?
hoping for the best, but take that one isolated situation in this Disney producer making that statement and blow that up to, something bigger. And, a lot of media, prominent media figures and outlets continuously, without evidence, say that Trump is a racist. And when you do that, right, you say that kind of thing, it's not just, you allow, you demonize the one guy and then anybody supports him, which is clearly happening. And the kids in this situation are evidence of it. They're racist. And so, you've got this guy, again, isolated incident, but blow that up into this bigger picture. And the media is not apologizing. The media is not deleting their comments on this stuff. They're continually saying this kind of thing, and they're continuously promoting this kind of thing. And they have no problem putting this stuff out there with zero evidence. And they have no shame in it either. They're like, and they continue just continue to talk and just go because they have nobody stopping them and saying, nope, hold on, wait a second here. Because they'll bring on guests on their programs, and it always works the same way. The guests come on and they start making a point, and then they're shut down, and then cut to commercial and blah blah blah. Oh, show's over. They never got to make a point. They never got to answer the question. They never got pressed. And so that's how that works. And so you see this thing. So when you hear things like the media is the enemy of the people, and you hear these, the distrust in the media, there's some really good reasons behind that. I mean, and the evidence is there. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you Do you see this, we'll call it rhetoric, we'll use it nicely and call it rhetoric, but this rhetoric that's pushed by the media and a lot of prominent figures in the media, you think that's problematic, that they continuously call the president racist and there's zero evidence?
Well, I think more so for me, I'm really thinking more about what individuals around me are perceiving, and to realize with this weekend and, my conversation with someone, that how they perceive I guess it's just a white person, right, who wears that hat, and what their immediate response is, and maybe all of the the feelings behind it. That's really informative. And I also think, again, I'm not a Trump hat wearer. I wouldn't encourage my children to wear political hats or Trump's hat. But I do think for, say, people who I care about who are doing this, like my friend's son, who is quote unquote white, and he wears a hat. For them just to be really aware of all the opinions that are out there, and how not just I don't know what percentage, but if I could just talk to one person in my life and realize this is what they're seeing, and I see this view online reflected in the media, but also in just everyday people, for them to realize that, like, that among a lot of people, they're not going to have any mercy or any benefit of the doubt. So I would just say, if they still choose to wear that hat, like, know that they might be exposing themselves to people thinking the worst of them. And that personally, say they aren't a racist. So let's assume it's someone who's not racist, who just agrees with the message of President Trump for whatever reason, whether it's the economy, or they like certain, I don't know, like pulling away from the national stage and just focusing on the country, whatever. If for whatever reason they're supporting the president, that they should just realize when they're out in public that they really probably better just realize they are under scrutiny, and that their actions could be read the wrong way. So they better conduct themselves very carefully, because with what happened, with what we saw in the video, like, if people are thinking all these things about teens wearing these hats, I mean, that can escalate to physical violence real quick, really quick. And we have seen all the other episodes of violence with the protests and with Antifa and these different groups. So I have a concern for that. It's been enlightening to see what is going on behind people's what is going on in their minds, and just how much, while one person thinks it's just their hat they're wearing because they supported this campaign, that it's really there's a lot of anger and probably hurt, when people hear, say, their nationality getting disparaged in the media, or, like, say, someone who's Mexican, and they don't like to hear the comments about the association with crime and things like that. Just to recognize that doesn't mean, I guess you can't wear your hat, but just to really be aware of what you might encounter.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, would you have the same concerns for your children if they were wearing, like, a Hope and Change T-shirt?
No.
Would you not want them to? Would you want them to distance themselves from that kind of stuff?
I don't think so it was interesting. I was actually thinking about it, like, how, well, I wasn't prepared this way, but Jeff has said he was, and then I've heard, other people say, young men, or especially young men of color, are prepared for how to deal with the police. They're coached on it, like, when you get pulled over in your car, you're supposed to put your hands on the wheel, like no quick motions, don't reach in your pocket, real serious, right? Preparing them in that way. Um, I think if I had a child who was to want to wear a Trump thing, I would want to prepare them like that. And no, it wouldn't make me think, I wouldn't think the same about a Hope and Change shirt. Who wears those? I mean, I guess people still wear those, right? Or say the next candidate who's going to come up. Say it's Kamala Harris, right? Wearing some Kamala Harris shirt. I wouldn't have the same concern for them.
Yeah, yeah. And so largely that demonization, that the reason why you have to have concern is because you see what is happening to people that wear those pieces of clothing, attire, hats, and stuff like that, because they're associated. Because you have people like Alyssa Milano coming out and saying, "Well, it's the new KKK hood." You don't have people doing that kind of thing on the other side, saying, "Oh, a Hope and Change shirt equals this. It equals all this hate and this rhetoric, blah blah blah." And so, when we hear things like the media is the enemy of the people, people have distrust in the media, and then we realize that this stuff is driven by the media, and they're the ones that are out there pushing this stuff, and they're the ones that are out there allowing celebrities to say these things, and without question, and without evidence, and they're just given a platform to say it. It seems like that's a little problematic, don't you think?
I'm gonna let Jeff take this one.
I'm trying to learn about how Donald Trump is a racist using this Wikipedia link that Neil sent me.
Maybe
there's a lot to read here.
Yeah.
And I guess you got to go through all of these things, and then make an opinion, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe we can devote some time to research on that subject, and close out the show with the promise of some digging.
Yeah,
we can dig during the week.
I think we should, because I think pressing the issue of evidence for this would be pretty important. So maybe with the promise next week, we could substantiate this claim of racism,
or whatever else tickles our fancy for the DJ Ron show.
Well,
I loved having Ned's questions. Ned's questions were very good. That really added something.
It shouldn't take an enormous amount of research and time. We shouldn't have to dig through hoops and interpret these things and come to all these weird conclusions and try to.
Oh no, he's got a whole list of links for us all on this one page.
No. I know. I understand that. I'm just simply stating for whether you're reading it or I'm reading it.
Can I warn you though?
It should not take a lot of effort to substantiate that.
Oh no, this is just a lot of evidence of the fact, Ron. But I will say I've heard some of these before, so I'm a little tainted. And I already kind of know that some of it takes some reading into. Anyhow, maybe we will address that on another time. It was a very interesting show, and I really appreciate all you. It is djronshow@gmail.com, and if you send us an email, because you heard it here, all right, what are you going to give to our first email who gets to the end? a signed T-shirt?
Maybe a card for Key's nose.
They have to ask us.
Key's nose sub. How about a Key's nose lunch date with one of the with one of the hosts?
No, that's too much. That's too much. That's too much. We're not saying the shirt won't have holes in it. We're just saying a T-shirt with our signatures on it.
How about a signed MAGA hat?